A single dad threw himself in front of a bullet to save the powerful CEO, only to wake up in the hospital with a diamond engagement ring on his finger. Share where you're watching from in the comments. Thanks for your support. Get ready for a story with an unexpected surprise waiting for you. The Manhattan intersection glittered with the first hints of autumn rain when Marcus Sterling saw her. Not that he was looking. He rarely looked anymore. At 34, with a 5-year-old son and an empire built on real estate and shrewd investments, Marcus had perfected the art of existing without truly seeing. His world had collapsed into spreadsheets and bedtime stories, into quarterly reports and soccer games, into the carefully maintained distance he kept from anything that might disrupt the fragile equilibrium he'd constructed after Sarah's death. Emma Chen was running. That was the first thing Marcus noticed as she bolted through the crosswalk, her worn messenger bag clutched against her chest, her dark hair streaming behind her like a flag of panic. She was 29 years old, though her threadbare coat and the desperate intensity in her eyes made her seem simultaneously younger and infinitely older. She'd just been fired from her 4th job in as many years, this time as a barista at a boutique cafe in Soho, where the owner had decided her energy didn't match the upscale clientele. Emma had been fighting tears as she'd packed her apron. The bullet came from nowhere, a crack of sound that split the afternoon like thunder in a clear sky. Marcus would later struggle to explain how he'd moved so quickly, how his protective paternal instincts had overridden his businessman's caution. He'd seen the gun first, a flash of metal in the hands of a man in a dark hoodie, someone running from a jewelry store 3 blocks back. He'd seen Emma's oblivious concentration on her phone, checking her bank balance with the kind of grim acceptance only the perpetually poor could master. He'd thrown his body between them without thinking. The impact was electric, white-hot pain that radiated from his shoulder as he crashed into Emma, sending them both sprawling across the wet pavement. The bullet meant for a bank robber's victim had found the chest of a billionaire instead, tearing through muscle and bone with the indifference of physics. Emma screamed, a sound of pure animal terror that would haunt Marcus's dreams for months to come. Around them, the city erupted into chaos, sirens wailing, pedestrians scattering, someone kneeling down beside them with a phone pressed to their ear. Marcus's vision tunneled. There was Emma's face, inches from his own, her dark eyes wide with shock and fear. There was the spreading warmth of blood, his blood soaking through his custom Armani shirt. There was the strange disconnection of knowing he was dying, or maybe not dying, it was hard to tell, and being more concerned about the way his fingers had gone numb. Had he called his son's nanny? Had he told anyone where little James was that afternoon? The boy would be expecting him at 5. Mrs. Patterson had made that specific comment about his perpetual lateness. "Stay with me," Emma whispered, pressing her hands against his chest, with an urgency that suggested she believed her pressure could hold back the tide of death. "Stay with me, please. Don't leave me here alone." It was a strange thing to think about, as consciousness began to fray at the edges. This girl he'd never met, who'd just become the most important person in his world, through the simple accident of being in the wrong place at the right time. Marcus Sterling, who prided himself on making calculated decisions and managing risk, had just made the most reckless choice of his life, and he would do it again. The hospital ceiling was white and impersonal, fluorescent lights humming like mechanical gods, indifferent to human suffering. Marcus's shoulder throbbed with a persistent ache that suggested someone had replaced his upper arm with burning coals and then refined the technique. Medication coursed through his veins. He could taste the chemical bitterness of it, could feel the soft edges it gave to pain and consciousness alike. Voices moved around him, in and out of focus. Doctors discussing blood loss and infection probability, nurses murmuring about vitals and discharge timelines, his lawyer arguing about security protocols. It was the weight on his left hand that finally pulled him fully awake. Marcus's eyes fluttered open. The room came into grainy focus, hospital standard, with its beige walls and uncomfortable chair that someone had tried to make welcoming with a throw blanket. His left hand lay atop the thin white blanket, and there was a woman's hand resting on it. Small hand, work-roughened, calloused from dishwashing and coffee-making and the thousand small labours of the perpetually broke. Emma was sitting in the chair beside his bed, her head tilted back, her mouth slightly open in sleep. In the unguarded vulnerability of unconsciousness, she looked impossibly young, maybe even younger than 29. She looked like someone's daughter. She looked like someone who'd never had anyone to catch her when she fell. There was a ring on her left ring finger. Marcus's ring, he recognized it immediately. A vintage platinum band with a modest diamond that he'd bought for Sarah 15 years ago, had never been able to bring himself to remove even after her death. The ring his son had played with when he was small, before Marcus had gently placed it in a drawer and refused to think about it. His ring was on Emma's finger. Marcus's first instinct was to panic. His second was to laugh, which sent a spike of pain through his shoulder that made him gasp. The sound was enough to wake Emma. She jolted upright, her eyes going wide, her hand gripping his with surprising strength. "You're awake," she breathed. "Oh God, you're awake. I was so scared. You were in surgery for 4 hours, and they wouldn't tell me anything because I'm not family, and I just kept thinking." She stopped, seeming to realize how much she was rambling. I'm sorry, You saved my life, and I don't even know your name, and I've been sitting here for 2 days, thinking you were going to die, and—" "The ring," Marcus interrupted, his voice hoarse from disuse. "Why is my ring on your finger?" Emma's cheeks flushed crimson. She began to pull her hand away, but Marcus held firm, despite the pain it sent radiating through his arm. "I had to tell them something," she said, speaking quickly, her words tumbling over each other like frightened children running from a fire. "When you were in surgery, they kept asking me who I was and why I was here, and I panicked. I'm nobody to you. I'm just some random woman you saved, but they kept treating me like I was nobody, like my being here was some kind of charity, and I got so angry. You risked your life for me. You were bleeding everywhere, and I was scared, and I saw the ring, and I told them we were engaged. I told them we were going to be married. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I can take it off right now." But she didn't take it off. Marcus looked at this girl. Woman, he corrected himself. She was 29, not some teenager, and something shifted in his chest that had nothing to do with his bullet wound. She'd been sitting by his bedside for 2 days. She'd lied to the hospital, risking legal consequences just to stay near him. She'd taken his dead wife's ring and made it a promise, made it a possibility, made it a future. "Keep it," he said. "What?" "Keep the ring. We'll figure out the rest later." The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a building in Tribeca, 40 stories above the bustling streets of Manhattan, a temple of glass and steel and carefully curated minimalism that spoke of wealth beyond most people's comprehension. Emma stood in the center of the living room, her small duffel bag, containing everything she owned that mattered, clutched in her hand like a life raft in a storm. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, and Emma found herself watching them rather than looking at Marcus. They'd left the hospital 3 days ago. Marcus had been discharged with a list of instructions that read like a military operation. No heavy lifting, physical therapy twice a week, pain management, and something vaguely threatening about infection control. Emma had been discharged from the same hospital with something far more complicated, an engagement ring that didn't belong to her, a billionaire's expectations that she didn't understand, and the knowledge that she was now living in a world so far removed from her own that she might as well have been dropped on an alien planet. "You'll stay in the guest room," Marcus said, and Emma had to admire his commitment to pretending that this was a normal arrangement that normal people made. The building has a gym, a pool, A concierge available 24 hours. There's a full kitchen, obviously. You can have the credit card, the one I'm about to give you, to get whatever you need." He pressed a black American Express card into her hand. The weight of it was surprisingly heavy for a piece of plastic. Emma looked at it like it might bite her. "I can't," she said, and meant it with the full force of her conviction. "I can't take your money, Mr. Sterling. Marcus, I can't take your money. I can't. I have to get a job. I need to find somewhere to live, somewhere I can actually afford. I need to pay you back for the hospital bills, or at least I need to start trying to pay you back. I can't be a kept woman. That's not who I am." Marcus's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his grey eyes, something that might have been respect. He settled himself on the sectional sofa with the careful movements of someone still healing, gesturing for her to sit. Emma remained standing, her shoulders tense, her small face set in lines of stubborn determination. "You saved my life," Marcus said quietly. "You could have run when I was shot. Most people would have. You stayed." I was in shock. "You kept pressure on my wound the entire time the ambulance was coming. You told me jokes to keep me conscious. Bad jokes, actually. Something about a chicken crossing the road. But you made me think about something other than dying. Then you sat in that hospital for 2 days without leaving, without eating properly, without knowing if I was going to survive. And when they tried to make you leave because you weren't family, you lied and said you were engaged to me, which was technically fraud. But you did it anyway because you were angry on my behalf." Emma finally sat down, her legs giving out beneath her. Up close, Marcus looked older than he had in the hospital, the shadows under his eyes deeper, his jawline more pronounced. But there was something in the set of his shoulders that suggested determination, a ruthless competence that probably worked very well in board meetings and probably terrified people on a regular basis. "I don't understand what you want from me," Emma said quietly. "Why haven't you I don't know. Why didn't you tell the hospital the truth?" "Because the truth is considerably more complicated." Marcus leaned back, his hand moving to his shoulder in an unconscious gesture of pain management. "My son's mother died 5 years ago. It was cancer, sudden, brutal, unexpected. James was 3 months old. I've spent the last 5 years being very careful about not allowing anyone into our lives, not allowing anything to disrupt the safety we've created. I've been a good father, I think. But I've been a terrible human being, closed off, isolated, incapable of feeling anything beyond duty and responsibility." "So what? I'm supposed to fix that? I'm supposed to heal your emotional wounds?" Emma stood up again, her voice rising. "I appreciate what you're saying, and I'm genuinely glad that saving your life made you feel something. But I can't be your therapy, Marcus. That's not fair to either of us." "No," he agreed. "You're right. But you could be my employee." Emma sat back down. "What?" "I need someone to help run my household. The position would include managing schedules, coordinating contractors, overseeing the staff, and most importantly, help caring for my son. James is 5. His nanny, Mrs. Patterson, is excellent, but she's 72, and I suspect she's planning to retire soon. I need someone who can be both a stable presence in his life and capable of managing the business side of maintaining a home and raising a child. The salary would be substantial, $200,000 a year, plus benefits, plus room and board here. You would have complete financial independence within 6 months if you chose to leave." Emma stared at him. "You're offering to hire me as a household manager and a nanny?" "Yes, because I saved your life." "No," Marcus said, and his grey eyes were steady and serious in a way that suggested he was telling the truth. "Because in the chaos of your panic and desperation, you chose to be kind to a stranger. Because you lied for me when lying could have gotten you arrested. Because in a world that's treated you with absolute callousness, you haven't allowed that to make you cruel. I need that in my life. My son needs that in his life. And whether you believe me or not, you need something too. You need stability. You need security. You need to know that for the first time in your life, someone has your back. He paused, watching her carefully. As for the ring, we can let people assume what they want. The press will have a field day regardless. Billionaire engaged to unknown woman. But we don't owe anyone the truth. If you keep the ring and let people believe the story, it will actually help James. He's been asking when he's going to have a mother. The other kids at his school have mothers. This gives me time to figure out how to handle that without putting him through the pain of my actually dating again. It was, Emma had to admit, a compelling argument. It was also, she suspected, the most manipulative thing anyone had ever said to her. But the manipulation was wrapped in genuine need, in loneliness that she recognized because she felt it too, in the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to be alone anymore. "I need to think about it," she said. "Of course. I'll have the guest room prepared for you. You can stay here while you think, at least until your shoulder heals more completely and you can move comfortably without the sling." But she didn't leave. That night, Emma lay in the guest room, which was larger than any apartment she'd ever lived in, and listened to the sounds of the city through the windows. She thought about the past 5 years, about the procession of dead-end jobs and failed relationships, about the way people looked through her, about the grinding daily anxiety of never knowing if she could pay rent next month. She thought about James Sterling, a child who wanted a mother, who probably didn't care that Emma was poor or unemployed, or had never had a real family to model herself after. By morning, she'd made her decision. James Sterling was a beautiful child, in the way that only children of considerable privilege can be. His clothes were designer, his school fees likely exceeded what Emma made in a year, his life had been carefully constructed to maximize his happiness and minimize his pain. He was also absolutely terrified of Emma. "Is she going to be my mommy?" he asked Marcus, his blue eyes wide with a mixture of hope and suspicion as Emma stood awkwardly in the doorway of his bedroom. The room was enormous, a gallery of toys and books and age-appropriate luxury that Emma found simultaneously depressing and overwhelming. She'd grown up in a shared bedroom with her mother, where toys were made from repurposed containers and imagination. "Emma is going to be staying with us," Marcus said carefully. "She's going to help take care of the house and help Mrs. Patterson look after you. But we need to let her get to know you first, okay? We don't rush into big decisions like that." Emma watched something shudder in James' expression, the recognition of disappointment, the closing off of hope. At 5 years old, he'd already learned to protect himself from longing. She recognized that expression. She saw it every time she looked in a mirror. "Hi, James," she said, ignoring Marcus's subtle warning gesture. She moved into the room slowly, the way you approach a frightened animal. "I'm Emma. I like your dinosaur collection." There were, in fact, dinosaurs everywhere. Plastic dinosaurs, stuffed dinosaurs, dinosaur books stacked in neat piles. It was actually a genuinely impressive collection. "I have 47 of them," James said, his voice small but gaining confidence as he talked about his passion. "T-Rex is my favorite because he's fierce and powerful, but Triceratops is interesting because he can defend himself. Can you identify them?" Emma found herself smiling. "I can try." "That one looks like a stegosaurus?" "Yes!" James practically vibrated with excitement. "You got it right. Most grown-ups don't know stegosaurus from ankylosaurus. Do you like dinosaurs?" "I don't know much about them," Emma admitted, sitting down on the floor beside his collection with an ease that made Marcus's shoulders relax slightly. "But I like learning about things. Do you think you could teach me?" For the next hour, Emma learned more about dinosaur physiology, extinction events, and paleontological theory than she'd ever thought possible to absorb. James talked with the intensity of a 5-year-old expert, explaining how T-Rex had powerful legs and a weak jaw, how triceratops had been herd animals, how some dinosaurs had feathers and were actually related to modern birds. Emma found herself genuinely interested, asking questions that generated even more enthusiastic responses. By the time Mrs. Patterson came to collect James for lunch, he'd appointed Emma his official dinosaur apprentice and extracted a promise that she'd look at the museum's paleontology exhibition with him very soon. "That was impressive," Marcus said as they watched James leave, his small hand in Mrs. Patterson's, his head turned back toward Emma with obvious reluctance. "He's a sweet kid," Emma said honestly. "Lonely, though. He really does want a mother." "I know." Marcus moved to the window, looking out at the city far below. "Sarah was his mother for only 3 months. He has no memories of her, no actual connection to her beyond what I've told him in stories. I didn't want to. I don't know. I didn't want him to experience the loss the way I experienced it. I thought if I kept everyone at a distance it would be safer for him, but I think I just made him lonelier instead." Emma stood beside him, not quite close enough to be touching, but close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. "You don't have to fix that all at once. Kids are resilient. He just needs to know that someone cares about him." Over the next 2 weeks, Emma fell into the rhythms of the Sterling household with surprising ease. Mrs. Patterson, it turned out, was delighted to have help. She'd been planning to retire for 2 years, but hadn't wanted to abandon Marcus during his grief-stricken years. Emma's presence seemed to give the older woman permission to finally rest, to move from constant vigilance into a more advisory role. Emma managed the household with an efficiency that surprised both of them. She coordinated contractors to fix the leaky bathroom tap that had been annoying Marcus for months. She reorganized the chaotic kitchen so that things were actually findable. She created a rotating meal plan that balanced nutritional requirements with James's dinosaur-themed preferences. Surprisingly, she learned, there was a whole genre of dinosaur-shaped pasta. But it was the time with James that changed her. Every afternoon at 3 o'clock, Emma and James would sit together and work through his school homework. James attended a prestigious preparatory school in Manhattan, the kind of place where 5-year-olds were already being prepared for Princeton, and he was desperate to excel. But he was also desperate to be noticed, to be praised, to be told that he was doing good. "Look, Emma," he'd call out whenever he completed a worksheet. "Look what I did." And Emma would look. She would genuinely admire his careful handwriting, his impressive math skills, his creative drawings. She would praise him without condescension, treating his accomplishments with the same gravity she might reserve for major business deals. James bloomed under the attention like a flower exposed to sun after months of rain. On his birthday, which occurred in the 3rd week of Emma's employment, she organized a surprise party. Nothing ostentatious, Marcus's world was ostentatious enough. Instead, she took James on a dinosaur-focused birthday excursion, the Museum of Natural History, lunch at a restaurant where they served dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets, a trip to a special paleontology workshop where James got to participate in a mock dig for dinosaur fossils. She invited a few of his classmates, working with Mrs. Patterson to coordinate transportation and permissions. When James saw the museum entrance, his face lit up in a way Emma had never seen before. When he emerged from the paleontology workshop with his discovered fossil clutched in his small hand, he was vibrating with joy. But the best moment came at the end of the day, when he was falling asleep in the car on the way home, and he murmured, "Emma is the best. Emma makes everything better." Marcus heard it. Emma saw him hear it, saw the emotion that crossed his face. Grief, yes, but also something softer, something that looked like hope. That night, after Emma had put James to bed and settled him with his favorite dinosaur, a plush T-Rex he called Terror, she found Marcus waiting for her in the kitchen. "Thank you," he said simply. "It was just a birthday party," Emma said, surprised by the intensity of his gratitude. "No," Marcus said. "Thank you for making him happy. Thank you for making him feel seen. I've been so afraid of messing this up, of failing him, that I forgot to actually participate in his life. You've reminded me what I've been missing." 6 weeks into her employment, Emma made a critical mistake. She attended a charity gala. It wasn't her fault. Marcus had been invited to a major fundraiser by the Children's Hospital, the same hospital where he'd nearly died, the same hospital that had saved his life. It was an important event in his professional and philanthropic circles. He needed to be there, and more problematically, he needed a date. "I could go alone," he'd suggested, and Emma had dismissed the idea with the same efficiency she applied to all household logistics. "No, you couldn't. Not now. You're engaged, remember? Not to mention, you're the lead donor for the night. You'd be hounded if you appeared solo. Besides, you need someone who knows the household logistics in case any donors ask about your philanthropic endeavors or your foundation's work." She'd meant it pragmatically. She'd meant it to be helpful. She'd meant it to be about James's needs, about maintaining the fiction they'd created, about supporting Marcus in his public role. She had absolutely not meant to end up in the closet of the most expensive boutique in Manhattan, trying on gowns that cost more than her monthly salary used to be. "The color will be stunning with your skin tone," Cecilia was saying, adjusting the neckline of the dress. "And the cut is very flattering for your frame. Elegant but understated, which is exactly what a woman in your position needs. You're going to be photographed, you understand? The press is very interested in the mysterious woman who caught Marcus Sterling's eye." Emma stared at her reflection and hardly recognized herself. The dress, which Cecilia had assured her cost nothing really, a trifle, was a masterpiece. It was sapphire blue silk, simple and elegant, with a flowing skirt that made her feel like she was floating. Her dark hair, usually pulled back in a functional ponytail, had been styled in loose waves by Cecilia's personal stylist. Her makeup had been carefully applied to enhance her natural features without overwhelming them. She looked beautiful, she looked rich, she looked like someone who belonged in Marcus Sterling's world. "I'll take it," Emma said, and tried not to think about what it meant that she was using Marcus's credit card for this. The gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in the Egyptian wing. There were perhaps 500 people there, representing Manhattan's charity elite, its philanthropic circles, its old money and new money, and people so rich that money itself seemed like an abstract concept with no particular relevance to their daily lives. Emma arrived with Marcus at 8 p.m., her hand in his, and immediately felt entirely out of place and oddly perfectly suited, both at the same time. "You look beautiful," Marcus said quietly as they moved through the entrance together, and Emma felt her traitorous heart skip a beat. "Thank you, you look very handsome yourself." He did. Marcus in a tuxedo was a dangerous proposition. It highlighted his broad shoulders, his strong jawline, the intensity of his grey eyes. Several women watched him as they passed, their gazes lingering in ways that suggested they were not thinking primarily about his charitable contributions. The first hour was a whirlwind of introductions and conversations Emma could barely follow. Hospital administrators wanted to thank Marcus for his funding. Other donors wanted to discuss investment opportunities. A woman who introduced herself as Vivian Blackwell, Marcus's ex-girlfriend, smiled with entirely too many teeth as she studied Emma with barely concealed disdain. "How long have you two been together?" Vivian asked, her elegant fingers wrapped around a champagne flute. "Not very long," Emma said honestly. "And yet here you are, getting the full Sterling treatment, the boutique wardrobe, the social introductions, the public declaration via charity gala. He moves quickly, doesn't he?" Vivian's smile widened. "Although I suppose that's easier when there's nothing to lose. Marcus has a very specific type when it comes to women, you understand. They're temporary. They're distracting, and they leave as soon as he has one of his episodes of emotional unavailability. Emma opened her mouth to respond, but Marcus appeared at her side with the smooth efficiency of someone who'd been through this exact scenario before. "If you'll excuse us, Vivian, we were promised a tour of the special exhibition," he said, not quite touching Emma, but close enough that anyone looking would understand the statement of possession. As he guided her away, Emma caught Vivian's expression, not angry, but calculating, as though Emma had just become a puzzle worth solving. "I'm sorry," Marcus said once they were far enough away. "Vivian is complicated. She's been part of my life off and on for about 10 years, and she's never quite accepted that we weren't compatible long-term." "Why weren't you compatible?" Emma asked, surprising herself with the question. "Because I was always holding something back," Marcus said, and there was an honesty in his voice that made Emma's chest ache. "I was always afraid that if I let someone in completely, they would leave, and it would hurt like Sarah leaving Hurt. So I picked people who were easy to push away, people who wanted the same kind of surface-level connection that I did. Vivian was beautiful and accomplished, and completely incapable of understanding why I wanted to spend most of my time with my 5-year-old son. Lee." They reached the Egyptian exhibition, and Marcus paused in front of a massive statue of a woman, her stone face serene despite the thousands of years that had passed since her carving. "I think I've been very unfair to a lot of people," Marcus said quietly, "including myself, including James, including me," Emma ventured. Marcus turned to look at her, and there was something in his expression that made her breath catch. "You're the only person in a very long time who's been honest with me, who's challenged me, who's not asking me to be someone different than I am. That's rare, Emma. That's worth more than all the perfect social connections in the world." The moment stretched between them, charged with something unspoken and terrifying. Then Marcus's phone rang, a discreet vibration against his hip that he initially ignored before taking it out with a frown. "It's the house," he said. "Let me check this." His expression changed immediately. "James had a nightmare. He's asking for you." Emma didn't hesitate. "We need to leave." The car ride back to the penthouse was silent, except for the sound of Manhattan traffic outside the windows. Emma stared at her reflection in the glass. The beautiful woman in the expensive dress, heading back to comfort a child she was supposed to be helping raise. The line between her role and her reality had become increasingly blurred, and Emma wasn't sure anymore which side of it she actually occupied. James was waiting for them in the living room, his small form lost in the oversized armchair where Mrs. Patterson had settled him while waiting for their return. His eyes were puffy from tears. His dinosaur clutched against his chest like a life raft. "You came back," he said when he saw Emma, his voice small and fragile. "Of course I came back," Emma said, moving toward him. "I'll always come back. That's what you do for the people you love." James threw himself into her arms, and Emma held him while he cried, her expensive dress quickly becoming wet with 5-year-old tears. She could feel Marcus watching them, could sense the weight of his attention and his understanding. Later, after James was asleep again and Mrs. Patterson had gone to her own quarters, Emma found Marcus standing on the terrace overlooking the city. "I need to be honest with you," he said without preamble. "The ring, the engagement, it started as a practical solution to a complicated situation. But somewhere along the way, it became something else." Emma's heart stopped. "Marcus, I have feelings for you," he continued, his voice steady. "Real feelings, serious feelings. And I understand that you might not feel the same way. And I understand that this situation is inherently unbalanced because you work for me, because I'm paying your salary, because I'm essentially the person with all the power in our relationship. But I need you to know, moving forward, that the ring on your finger and the fiction we've created are becoming very real to me, and I have no idea what to do about that. The city lights stretched below them, millions of individual points of light representing millions of individual stories, millions of people dealing with their own complications and fears and impossible situations. "I need time," Emma said finally. "I know. Take all the time you need." But they both understood the truth. Time wasn't going to fix what was broken about their arrangement. It was only going to make it worse. Reality has a way of intruding on carefully constructed arrangements, and it announced itself in the form of James's school assembly. The email arrived on a Tuesday. Parents and guardians invited to celebrate our community. Emma found herself studying the language with the hypervigilance of someone who'd spent her life on the wrong side of belonging. She'd assumed Marcus would attend, naturally. Instead, he called an emergency meeting in his office. "I need you there," he said bluntly. "The school is increasingly asking about James's family structure. There have been comments from other parents about him being less fortunate because he doesn't have a mother. I know it's not fair. I know it's not your responsibility. But you've become his primary caregiver, and the school and the other children are very aware of that. So you want me to attend as, what, the household manager? The nanny? Or do you want me to maintain the fiction that I'm your fiancé?" "I want you to attend as whatever you're most comfortable being," Marcus said carefully. "But I'll be honest. If you attend as my fiancé, it will stop a lot of questions. If you attend as the nanny, it will confirm every prejudice the school already has about James's domestic situation." Emma leaned back in her chair, studying the man across from her. Marcus had been her employer for 6 weeks. In that time, he'd revealed his deepest vulnerabilities, introduced her to his world, told her that he had feelings for her that went beyond the practical arrangement they'd made. He'd also made it clear that he was asking her to choose, stay within the boundaries of her role as an employee, or step beyond those boundaries and become something else entirely. "I'll attend as your fiancé," she said finally. "But Marcus, we need to talk about what happens next. This pretense can't continue indefinitely. Eventually, people are going to expect us to actually get married, and we can't sustain a lie that big." "I know," he said quietly, "and I've been thinking about that. I have an idea, but I need you to hear me out completely before you respond, okay?" Emma nodded, though her stomach had begun to churn with anxiety. "Marry me," Marcus said. "Not as a pretense, not as a way to solve James's social problems or to maintain a fiction. Actually marry me. I know it's fast, and I know you probably think I'm completely insane, but I can't," Emma interrupted. "Marcus, I'm overwhelmed. I've gone from being unemployed and homeless 6 weeks ago to living in a penthouse and managing a household and attending charity galas. I have no idea what's real anymore, whether I'm genuinely happy or whether I'm just confused by the rapid change in circumstances. I care about James deeply, but that's not love for you. That's attachment and gratitude and a kind of survival instinct that makes me need to believe in your commitment to me." "Then let me prove my commitment in real ways," Marcus said, standing up and moving around the desk toward her. "Marry me, and we'll go to counseling. We'll talk through the complications of our arrangement. We'll give ourselves time, but officially, not hiding, not pretending, actively choosing each other. And what if I choose not to? What if I decide that I need to leave and rebuild my life somewhere else? Then I'll let you go," Marcus said, and the simplicity of it was somehow the most convincing argument of all. "But I don't think you will." The school assembly happened on a Thursday afternoon. Emma arrived early to help James with his contribution to the performance. He'd memorized a poem about dinosaurs that he was supposed to recite in front of the assembled families. They waited backstage, Emma adjusting his tie and smoothing his hair, James vibrating with pre-performance nerves. "I'm scared," he whispered. "I know," Emma said, getting down on her knees so they were eye to eye. "But you've practiced this poem 100 times. You're going to do great, and I'll be in the audience the whole time, watching you and feeling so proud. Promise? Promise." The auditorium was packed with well-dressed parents, most of them women, mothers who'd arranged their schedules to attend, who'd prioritized their children's school events, who represented the kind of stable, engaged parenting that Emma had never experienced. She spotted Marcus near the back, his expression intent as he watched the stage. James's performance was objectively unremarkable. He stumbled over one word, forgot his place for a moment, spoke too quickly. But to Emma, watching him stand on that stage and recite his dinosaur poem in front of an audience of strangers, it was the most extraordinary performance she'd ever witnessed. When he finished, he scanned the audience until his eyes found hers, and his face broke into the biggest smile. After the performance, there was a reception in the gymnasium with store-bought cookies and juice boxes and parents circulating while their children played. Emma found herself standing next to James, answering questions from other parents. "Are you the nanny?" one woman asked, her tone suggesting this was obvious from Emma's youth and her proximity to a child. "I'm the household manager," Emma said calmly, "and Marcus's fiancée will be helping coordinate his care moving forward." It was a deliberate move, one that she and Marcus hadn't explicitly discussed, but that Emma had decided was necessary. She wasn't going to hide who she was to Marcus, wasn't going to pretend to be less than she'd become. The woman's expression shifted, recalibrating as she processed the information. "Oh, I see." By the time the assembly ended, word had clearly circulated through the parent community. Marcus Sterling's fiancée had shown up, and she was every bit as beautiful and poised as the rumors had suggested. Emma caught snatches of conversation as she and Marcus collected James and prepared to leave. So young. Where did he meet her? Probably after his wife died. Looks like she actually cares about the boy, at least. That last comment came from a woman Emma recognized from the hospital, a nurse who'd helped care for Marcus during his recovery. She smiled at Emma with genuine warmth, which somehow made the other comments easier to bear. As they were leaving, a man in an expensive suit intercepted them. Emma recognized him immediately from the hospital paperwork. Dr. Richard Ashton, the surgeon who'd performed Marcus's surgery. "Marcus," he said warmly, shaking Marcus's hand. "Good to see you looking so well. And this must be Emma, the woman responsible for half of New York, knowing your story." "Hello, Dr. Ashton," Emma said, shaking his hand. "Thank you for saving Marcus's life." "He probably saved mine first," the doctor said, and there was something knowing in his gaze as he studied them together. "I heard about the engagement. That was fast." "Very fast," Marcus acknowledged, "but when you know, you know." Something about the doctor's expression suggested he understood more than he was saying. He bid them goodbye and drifted back into the crowd, and Emma felt the weight of Marcus's attention on her as they walked toward the exit. "You're really going to do this," he said quietly, and it wasn't a question. "Do what?" Emma asked, though she knew. "Commit to this, to us, to building a real life together instead of just maintaining the fiction." Emma looked at James, who was chattering about his dinosaur poem performance with the enthusiasm of a 5-year-old who'd just successfully completed his first major social obligation. She looked at Marcus, who was watching her with an intensity that suggested he understood exactly how much this decision was going to cost her. Her independence, her sense of self, her ability to ever fully untangle her feelings of gratitude from her feelings of love. "Yes," she said finally, "but we do it the right way. No more lies, no more pretense. If we're going to do this, it's real from the beginning." "Real," Marcus echoed, and it sounded like a promise. The penthouse transformed overnight into what Emma had come to think of as wedding headquarters. The wedding planner, Margot, arrived with binders full of flowers and color schemes. Emma made simple choices: white silk dress, minimal flowers, the Plaza Hotel for the reception. "The bride should be the focus," Margot insisted. "It's my wedding," Emma said firmly, "and I want it to reflect who we actually are, not some fantasy." Marcus Sr. arrived 3 days before the wedding, a man of considerable wealth and considerable skepticism. "You come from nothing. Marcus comes from something," he said over cocktails. "I do," Emma agreed calmly. "But I'm not here to use him as a stepping stone. I'm here because I care about him and his son. I'm going to actually be present in their lives." By dinner's end, Marcus Sr. was telling Emma stories about Marcus's childhood. By the end of the meal, he'd confessed that his own emotional distance had made Marcus afraid of connection, afraid that being open could result in loss. "My son is broken in ways that will take time to heal," Marcus Sr. said quietly. "If you're marrying him thinking you'll save him, you'll have a difficult marriage. But if you're willing to journey with him as he saves himself, you might actually have something real." The night before the wedding, Emma couldn't sleep. She paced the guest room and tried to reconcile who she'd been 6 weeks ago, desperate, unemployed, running through an intersection without looking where she was going, with who she'd become. Around 3 in the morning, James appeared in his dinosaur pajamas, clutching his beloved T-Rex plush. "I had a bad dream," he said, his voice small in the dark hallway. "Come here," Emma said, pulling him into bed with her, letting him curl against her side the way he always did when he was scared. "You're going to marry Daddy tomorrow," James said quietly. "Yes. Are you happy about that?" "Yes," James said, "but I'm scared. What if you don't like us after the wedding? What if you leave?" Emma held her son, and she did think of him as her son now, with the certainty that no marriage was required to legitimize, and made a promise she would spend the rest of her life keeping. "I'm going to stay. I'm going to be here for you and your daddy, even when it's hard. That's what love means, Jamie. It means staying." He fell asleep in her arms, and Emma dozed fitfully. When morning came, she knew with absolute certainty that whatever doubts she had, whatever fears circled in the corners of her mind, none of them mattered anymore. She was committed. She was choosing this life. At 3 p.m., she walked down an aisle toward the man who'd saved her life and the child who'd saved her soul, and said yes to the future. The first month of married life was surprisingly ordinary. Waking up next to the same person every morning. Arguments about whose turn it was to help James with homework. Discovering that Marcus left his socks scattered throughout the penthouse like fabric-based Easter eggs. Emma folded them and tried to impose order on chaos. 3 months into the marriage, Emma discovered she was pregnant. She took the test while Marcus was in the shower, staring at the 2 pink lines with shaking hands. "I'm pregnant," she said when he emerged. Marcus stared at her. Seconds ticked past. Emma felt her anxiety spiral. What if he didn't want another child? What if he thought she'd gotten pregnant on purpose? "You're pregnant?" he repeated, and his expression shifted into wonder. "We're having a baby." "If you want to," Emma said, her voice smaller than she'd intended. "Of course I want to." Marcus pulled her toward him. "When did you find out?" "About 30 seconds ago." But that night, Emma found something in Marcus's office. An email from Dr. Ashton, the surgeon who'd saved Marcus's life. It mentioned fertility concerns. It mentioned that Marcus might not be able to have biological children. It mentioned that he'd known this for months and hadn't told her. Emma stood in his office, the email glowing on the screen, and felt the foundation of their relationship crack. "Did you know?" Emma asked, her voice steady despite the betrayal blooming in her chest. "Did you know before you married me that you might not be able to have children?" "I suspected," Marcus admitted quietly. "I wasn't sure, and I didn't want to panic you with something that might not even be true." "You suspected, And you didn't tell me. Emma's voice rose. Marcus, I have the right to know that information. I have the right to make informed decisions about my own body and my own pregnancy. You're right, Marcus said, his voice carefully modulated in a way that made her anger spike further. You're absolutely right. I made a mistake. I should have told you. I was afraid that if you knew about the fertility issue, you'd decide I wasn't worth the risk. So this is about you, Emma said, understanding blooming like darkness in her chest. This is about your fear that I'd leave you if I knew you might not be able to have biological children. It's not actually about me at all. She left the office before Marcus could respond, locking herself in the master bedroom and refusing to open the door when he knocked. Emma, please, he called through the door. Let's talk about this. I don't want to talk about anything, Emma called back. I want you to understand what you've done. I want you to really understand how violated I feel right now. That night, Emma lay alone in the bed they'd been sharing for months, her hand on her belly where their child was kicking softly, and allowed herself to consider the impossible. What if this had all been a mistake? What if she'd been fooling herself about Marcus's ability to genuinely see and respect her? Labor came on a Tuesday night with brutal intensity. Emma woke at 2 a.m. to a contraction that felt like her entire body was being slowly crushed. She called Marcus immediately, and he was out of bed in seconds, his earlier transgressions seemingly forgotten in the face of this new urgency. "Hospital," he said, grabbing her bag. "We're going to the hospital right now." 12 hours later, covered in sweat and thoroughly exhausted, Emma delivered a healthy baby girl. The doctor placed her on Emma's chest, and Emma looked down at this tiny human who had somehow managed to change everything just by existing. "She's perfect," Marcus whispered from beside the bed. "Emma, she's perfect." Emma didn't respond. She was too busy falling in love. They named her Sarah, after Marcus's late wife, a choice that complicated Emma's feelings but seemed important to Marcus. Little Sarah was mostly quiet and mostly slept, occasionally waking to eat with surprising ferocity for someone so small. "She has your determination," Marcus said to Emma on the third day, watching Sarah grip Emma's breast while feeding. "She has your stubbornness," Emma replied. And it was the first time they'd had an actual conversation since the email revelation. "Emma," Marcus began. "Not now," Emma said quietly. "Not while I'm dealing with hormones and exhaustion and the fact that my body feels like it's been through a war. We can have this conversation later. But right now, I just need to take care of our daughter." They brought Sarah home to the penthouse, which had been transformed in their absence into some kind of luxury nursery. Emma felt simultaneously grateful and frustrated by the expense. "This is insane," she said to Marcus, standing in the doorway of the nursery with Sarah in her arms. "She's a baby. She doesn't care that her clothes are from Milan or that her crib costs $30,000. "I know," Marcus said, "but I'm trying to prove something. I'm trying to prove that I can take care of you, both of you, by spending money. By making sure you never have to worry about anything again," Marcus said quietly. "By making sure Sarah never goes without. By ensuring that the kind of poverty and instability you experienced is something she never has to know." Emma looked at her daughter's tiny, perfect face and understood something about Marcus that she'd been struggling to grasp. He wasn't trying to control her with money. He was trying to love her the only way he knew how. He'd grown up with a father who expressed love through financial provision, and he was repeating the pattern because it was what he understood. It didn't excuse his behavior with the fertility information, but it did explain it. 2 weeks into Sarah's life, James asked if he could hold her. Emma watched Marcus set up the moment carefully. The couch, the pillows, the way he positioned James's arms to support Sarah's head, with the kind of attention that suggested he was terrified his son would accidentally destroy his new sister. "Hi, Sarah," James whispered, his eyes wide with wonder as he looked at his baby sister's face. "I'm your big brother. I'm going to teach you about dinosaurs, okay? First, I'll teach you about T-Rex because he's very famous. Then we'll move on to Triceratops." Emma watched Marcus watch his son bond with his baby sister, and she saw him understanding something too, that this daughter, regardless of whether she was his biological child, was his daughter in every way that mattered. That love wasn't determined by biology. It was determined by commitment and choice. Later that evening, after James had been put to bed and Sarah was sleeping, Marcus found Emma on the terrace. "I want to talk about the fertility thing," he said without preamble. "I'm listening," Emma said. "I was terrified," Marcus said quietly, "when Dr. Ashton told me about the possibility of fertility issues. I was so afraid that it meant I wasn't enough, that my inability to provide biological children meant I was failing as a man, as a partner. And then you became pregnant so quickly, which seemed like the universe was telling me that maybe the diagnosis was wrong, that maybe I was going to be okay. And I didn't tell you because I couldn't handle the idea that you might reject me if you knew the truth." Emma listened to him lay out his insecurity, and she found herself understanding the paradox of their relationship. They'd been bound together through a lie, a fiction created in a moment of panic that had somehow transformed into something real. But the realness had only come because they'd eventually started being honest with each other. And his failure to be honest about the fertility issue had fractured that carefully built trust. "I need you to understand something," Emma said. "I don't love you because you can provide things. I don't love you because you're perfect, or because you have money, or because you can solve all my problems. I love you despite those things sometimes making it harder to see who you actually are. But I can only love you if I trust you. And right now, my trust in you is fractured." "What do I have to do to fix it?" Marcus asked. "I don't know," Emma said honestly, "but I think we need to actually go to therapy. I think we need to talk to someone who can help us navigate this, because I love you, but I can't spend the rest of my life wondering if you're keeping other secrets from me." Marcus nodded. "Okay, I'll call someone tomorrow." 3 weeks later, they started seeing Dr. Jennifer Morrison, a therapist who seemed entirely unimpressed by Marcus's wealth and entirely focused on getting them to actually communicate with each other. "Tell me about the moment you decided to marry him," Dr. Morrison asked Emma at one session. "There wasn't really a moment," Emma said. "It was more like a slow accumulation of moments that added up to a commitment I couldn't take back." "Do you feel like you couldn't take it back? Or you didn't want to take it back?" Dr. Morrison asked. "Both," Emma said. "I felt trapped by my own choices, but I also wanted to be making those choices." Dr. Morrison turned to Marcus. "Do you feel like Emma was trapped?" "Yes," Marcus admitted. "I was always aware that the power in our relationship was unbalanced. I had money, I had security, I had the ability to provide things. Emma had none of those things, and I used that imbalance to convince her to marry me." "Did I use it?" Emma found herself defending him. "Or did I choose to stay, despite the imbalance?" "Both," Dr. Morrison said. "Marcus, would you have pursued Emma if she'd come to you as an equal?" "Probably not," Marcus said. "I was drawn to her need. I was drawn to the idea that I could save her." "That's your work," Dr. Morrison said. "Understanding that loving someone isn't about saving them. Emma, do you want to be married to Marcus if he had no money, no resources, nothing but himself?" Emma thought about the question carefully. "I don't know," she said finally. "I think I would be, But our relationship would be completely different without the money dynamic. By Sarah's 6-month birthday, their marriage had shifted into something new. It was no longer based on the fiction they'd created. It was based on the choice to keep choosing, day after day, despite the complications and the pain. But Emma needed to know something else. "I need to leave," she told Marcus one evening. "Not permanently. Just, I need to figure out who I am outside of this relationship. I need to know if I can survive without you." Marcus didn't argue. He didn't offer money or resources or anything to make her stay. He just said, "I'll wait for you as long as it takes." Emma rented an apartment in the East Village, using money she'd saved from her salary. She found a job at a non-profit helping homeless women find employment. She lived simply and rebuilt herself outside of the sterling name. 3 months later, she ran into Marcus at a grocery store. He looked different. Thinner, sadder, but also more real. "Hi," he said carefully. "Hi," Emma replied. "How are the kids?" "Missing you. James wants to know when you're coming home for dinner." "I don't know," Emma said, "but I know I can survive without you. I know I'm a real person with a real life. And I know I love you anyway." "Come home," Marcus said. "But not to the penthouse. Somewhere we both choose." Chapter 9. The New Equilibrium. They found an apartment in Chelsea, something in between the penthouse and Emma's studio. Nice, but not ostentatious. Space for both their worlds. "This is normal," James said, exploring his new room. "I like normal." Marcus adjusted his schedule to be more present. Emma continued her work at the non-profit. They made love for the first time in over a year. Not out of obligation, but out of genuine desire and the recognition that they'd survived the worst of each other. One evening, 6 months into their new arrangement, Emma found Marcus working on his laptop in the living room. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Saving me from that bullet?" Marcus set down his laptop and took her hand. "No," he said, "but not for the reason you think. I don't regret it because saving you led to this amazing life we're building. I regret it because I'm sorry I had to be shot for me to wake up and realize that I was living a life that wasn't actually worth living. I was going through the motions. I was being a father to James, but I wasn't being a person. And then you came into my life and you demanded that I be a person. You demanded that I be real." "I demand it every day," Emma said. "Sometimes I probably demand it too much." "You demand exactly enough," Marcus said. "You're the only person who's ever done that. You're the only person who's ever loved me enough to refuse to accept anything less than my best self." That night, they made love, with a tenderness that suggested they'd finally found their way back to each other. When Dr. Ashton sent a letter revealing that his initial fertility assessment was incorrect, that Marcus had maintained full fertility, Marcus cried. Not about his fertility, but about understanding that all his controlling behavior had been rooted in fear, not necessity. "I was afraid," he said. "I was afraid I would fail as a father the way I felt I'd failed as a husband. I was afraid that loving another child would somehow diminish what I felt for James. But the truth is, I was just afraid of losing you." Emma held him while he cried, not in the way she'd been trained to comfort him as his employee or his servant, but in the way a partner holds someone who's grieving their own past and their own failures. By the time their second biological child was born, a son they named Alexander, Marcus had found a way to be present in a way that didn't require Emma to be anything other than herself. 5 years later, they renewed their vows in Central Park. James was the ring bearer, Sarah was the flower girl, Alexander sat with Mrs. Patterson, making baby sounds. Marcus looked at Emma in her pale gold dress, and she saw the man she'd first met, not the billionaire, but the person who'd chosen her when she was nobody. "I promise to love you not despite your strength, but because of it," Marcus said. "I promise to build a life based on equality, not dependency. I promise to show up every single day as the man you deserve rather than the man I'm afraid of becoming. I promise to never let you rescue me in a way that makes me lose myself, Emma said. I promise to challenge you when you need challenging, and to support you when you need support, and to always remember that I chose you because you're worth choosing, not because I need you. At the reception, Marcus Sr. gave a toast. I didn't think my son could be happy, but Emma didn't let him hide. She demanded he be real. Thank you for loving my son. Thank you for showing him that love can exist without rescues, that partnership can exist without dependency, that forever can exist without fairy tales. Later that evening, they returned to their apartment in Chelsea and looked at the city lights, different from the penthouse view, more honest, more real. Do you think we have a future? Emma asked. We have now, Marcus said, and now is enough. Emma leaned her head against his shoulder. She thought about the girl she'd been, desperate for rescue, willing to take whatever was offered. She thought about the woman she'd become, standing alone, understanding that true love was about choosing someone despite their power, not because of it. The penthouse was eventually sold. The money funded a foundation Emma created, helping homeless women find employment and agency. James became a paleontologist. Sarah became a therapist. Alexander became a journalist. Emma took his hand. We made choices, she said. You chose to jump in front of that bullet. I chose to stay. I chose to marry you. I chose to leave. And I chose to come back because I wanted to, not because I needed to. That's not fate. That's just two people deciding the other person is worth the effort. Forever, Emma whispered. Forever, Marcus echoed. And in that moment, with the city humming below them and their life spread out before them, their forever truly began.